Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned the Russian attack on Ukraine once again, saying the war is what caused global food shortages. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says a lot of the humanitarian aid sent to Afghanistan following the devastating earthquake may not make its way to the Afghani people. And a new bus in Lethbridge will be making its way to many of our city's most popular tourist locations.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A new study suggests Canada outperformed other countries during the first 2 years of the pandemic, thanks in part to public health measures and a very successful vaccine campaign. The research was published by the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Researchers compared data from 11 different countries, including Canada, the United States, Germany, Italy, the UK, and Japan. The study's co-author says Canada had the highest vaccination rate, the lowest infection rate, and the lowest death rate. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says countries must stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin and support democracy in Ukraine. Speaking at the conclusion of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, Trudeau says he told leaders that Russia is responsible for much of the food shortages and supply chain issues being felt around the world.
We're all feeling the impacts of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine through rising food and fuel prices and supply chain issues. We must continue to stand up to Putin. We must work together with partners and allies to support Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, as well as Ukraine's democracy. This is about global stability, security, and prosperity. And it's something that I raised in my one-on-one conversations with many leaders, including with the presidents of Rwanda, Ghana, Botswana, Kenya, and Zambia, as well as with the prime ministers of Antigua, Jamaica, Singapore, among many others.
Several explosions rocked the west side of the Ukrainian capital on Sunday. Now, according to city officials in Kyiv, at least 2 residential buildings were struck. Rescue groups battled the flames and searched through the rubble for survivors. Kyiv's mayor said the airstrikes were most likely symbolic ahead of the NATO summit in Madrid, Spain. The city of Bucha near Kyiv in Ukraine hit the headlines when scenes of bodies on the streets were reported following the invasion of Russian troops. One place that has remained a lifeline for the Ukrainian people has been the Bucha Baptist Church. As we hear in this next report, despite missiles narrowly missing the church, it is filled to capacity every week as those in the community are having their spiritual needs being met.
Since the war began in Ukraine, Bucha Baptist Church has been a safe haven for thousands of people impacted by the conflict, which was devastated when many people were massacred there. When the attacks first began, 167 people sought refuge in the basement of the building. Each Sunday their church is full with more than 1,000 people, and they've distributed more than 150 tons of food to everyone who comes to hear the gospel. 2 brothers serving in ministry there are Sergei and Tima. Sergei's apartment caught fire during the attacks, and he continues to sleep in the church's basement with his family. But despite losing everything, his passion is to continue to share the gospel with all those who come to the church for help.
People need to hear the gospel. They think they need food, but they need to hear the gospel. So we use food to share the gospel. This is a big opportunity to the people, Christian people, stay in Ukraine and give people hope. Because lots of unbelievers, they think if Christian will run, there is no hope. So they look at us and they see our faith by what we're doing. I pray with the people. A couple of people receive Jesus, they confess, and we share with the people peace and love.
And much of Tima's ministry has been to rescue families and deliver aid to some of the worst hit conflict zones. He says they've been amazed at the spiritual hunger of the people in this community.
A lot of people just come to hear the gospel, and that was a surprise for us, because so many people rejected the help. They just said we just want to hear the gospel.
And as these 2 remarkable brothers continue to serve the people of Ukraine, his hope many more will encounter the real bread of life through the love of Christ. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance, Bucha, Ukraine.
Emergency aid has been reaching survivors of last week's deadly earthquake, which rocked the mountainous regions of Afghanistan.
د څو ورځو کې د افغانستان د مسلمان ولس او د غیرتي ولس هغه د خیریه بنسټونو نهادونو کومکونه چې دلته راغلي دي کوم نهادونه راغلي دلته چې دا هر ورځ تقریبا موږ تر 1000 کورو پورې سروي او توزیع لرو نو څو ورځې کېږي چې دا لړۍ روانه ده.
A number of countries are looking to support Afghanistan with humanitarian aid following last week's devastating earthquake, which claimed more than 1,000 lives. Now, will the money actually get to the Afghani people, or will the Taliban just take the money and run? Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari seems to think the latter will prevail.
While we know that this was a very harsh earthquake, while we feel for the people of Afghanistan, we really can't trust the information coming out of Afghanistan either, because it is run by the Taliban. The media, the government, everything is run by the Taliban, and they're using this earthquake to take advantage of, obviously, humanitarian aid and global sympathy, and they're asking for their frozen assets to be unfrozen and to be given back to Afghanistan. This is something that the Taliban have always wanted since coming into power, so now they will take advantage of this time period and say, you know what, it's for the people of Afghanistan. But will that money and aid, if it is given back to Afghanistan, will it go to the people of Afghanistan? I hardly, I doubt it. It will go towards terrorism and the Taliban and really growing their power over the poor people of Afghanistan.
Make sure you catch the full interview with our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari coming up in the second half of our show. Well, it was a beautiful start to the work week. Lots of sunshine and warm temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, we may even see close to 30 degrees this week.
Yeah, that's right. As quickly as tomorrow, Hal, on Tuesday, we could have temperatures rise up to 29 degrees. Now, keep in mind, it's going to feel even warmer with that humidex. Could feel closer to that 30-degree mark. Also, UV index of 8, which is very high. So if you're planning to be outdoors on Tuesday, you might want to think about packing that sunscreen. As for Wednesday, also looking at temperatures very close to 30 degrees. Should have sunshine all throughout the week as well. I'll have more details about all of that coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Ottawa is bracing for a new round of protests expected to start on Canada Day. With the Freedom Convoy still top of mind for many residents, city officials have security plans already drawn up to allow for safe celebrations despite the threat of more demonstrations.
After 2 years, 2 long years of virtual celebrations, Canada Day 2022 is returning with live programming at Le Breton Flats in Ottawa and Place des Festivals Zibi in Gatineau. Residents and downtown businesses have expressed concerns, rightfully so, about possible protests on Canada Day and beyond. I want to assure everyone that the RCMP, Ottawa Police, Police de Gatineau, and the Parliamentary Protective Service are fully prepared to respond to any situation. The city's Emergency Operations Centre will be mobilized to support the Ottawa Police Service and to coordinate city services throughout the long weekend. As I've said previously, this is the day for families and children and for everyone who wants to celebrate the diversity of languages and culture that make our country strong and free. We won't be intimidated by any group that plans to disrupt the celebrations. We're prepared and we will not tolerate any illegal activity by anyone.
The Alberta government, meanwhile, announced that Canada Day celebrations are on again at the Legislature in Edmonton following a 2-year hiatus. Officials say visitors can enjoy free entertainment from noon until 5 p.m. on Friday. There will be lots of fun for kids, along with various food trucks and food stands set up on the Legislature grounds. Officials also said the washrooms will be set up. You know, Canada Day is shaping up to be a very busy day here in Lethbridge, too. BCN's Naveen Day has all the details on what the city has in store for us.
The days are warm and COVID mandates are eased. And after so much uncertainty with the safety of public gatherings, it's the perfect recipe for a big cause to celebrate our nation's birthday in Lethbridge. Chair of the Canada Day Committee, Sarah Burton, says the festivities start in the morning at Golf Gardens.
Starts at 9 a.m. with a charity breakfast, and it'll run through till 4 o'clock. They have an artisan market and a car show running along with artists doing performances throughout the day. Then you can hop on over to Henderson Lake. We are there from noon until 11 p.m. Starts at noon with our main stage. We have 25 food vendors and a boatload of different kids activities throughout the day. Face painting and children's plays, bouncy houses, you name it, you can probably find it over there. Everything is open to the general public and free and accessible. We will be there till 11 o'clock when the fireworks will kick off.
And while many of us are happy to be at large gatherings again, the city is taking measures to ensure uninvited viruses don't get a chance to spread.
We do have hand sanitizer stations there, and we are just encouraging people to just keep their socially conscious distances and just, be mindful. If you're not feeling well, try not to come out. We'd like you to enjoy the day, but maybe enjoy the day in your own backyard rather than in a general public area if you're not feeling well that day.
And according to Burton, if you plan on attending the fireworks here at Henderson Lake Park, the best viewing spot is anywhere along the shoreline. For those that wish to celebrate at home, the city is continuing their decoration contest for 2022. Give your home, business, or sidewalk a Canada-themed flair for a chance to win a prize. More info can be found at the City of Lethbridge website. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Alberta will choose its new leader and premier of the UCP on October the 6th. Now, the field is getting quite crowded with a number of candidates, including two who used to be the leaders of Alberta's former Wild Rose Party. Dave Naylor, editor of the Western Standard, says a number of candidates are creating platforms of putting Alberta first.
This whole UCP leadership race seems to be, Alberta first based. What can we fight the feds over? So I think a lot of the former UCP members who may have left towards the Wild Rose Independence Party maybe look at this and say, you know what, maybe they're starting to talk the proper game now, and maybe we will see some action, and then it may lure them back.
Dave Naylor from the Western Standard will have more on the UCP leadership race in an exclusive interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Police received a report of an 83-year-old man who was found wandering in the wilderness of the Porcupine Hills west of Claresholm on Saturday night. RCMP say a 40-year-old man and his 11-year-old son were out riding their ATVs when they encountered the senior. The man was reported missing only a few minutes prior to when he was discovered. He was assessed by EMS, released, and transported back to his family. Now, upon further investigation, police say the man had been wandering the wilderness for around 8 hours after he said his truck got stuck in the nearby area. Police say the caller and his 11-year-old son undoubtedly saved the missing man's life. A 30-year-old woman died after being thrown from her horse at the Pinocchio Stampede grounds on Sunday. RCMP say the woman was not only thrown, but then trampled by other horses. Police say they arrived just after 7 p.m. on Sunday to assist EMS with the injured female, but she succumbed to her injuries. The incident is now being investigated by Occupational Health and Safety. The deceased woman's name was not released. Lethbridge police say they handed out 44 tickets during its most recent weekend enforcement blitz. LPS say the plan is to help provide safer roads for users and allow residents to enjoy more peace and quiet. There have been multiple complaints in our city of drivers racing, stunting, and cruising around with either no mufflers or modified loud exhaust systems. Police say they also caught a couple of people who were drinking and driving. 7 vehicles were towed, including one for loud exhaust. Now, in addition to various traffic violations that were handed out, police also gave out tickets for driving without insurance, illegal window tinting, and having open alcohol in the vehicle. A new city-run bus route will connect riders to some of Lethbridge's most beautiful tourist destinations. CultureLink will make stops at 6 different areas. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, this free bus tour was years in the making.
With CultureLink, Lethbridge's first fare-free cultural connector, we hope to expand the minds and the hearts who travel with us to these amazing destinations.
If you're thinking of a way to head to different Lethbridge tourist attractions through the comfort of a bus, then CultureLink is your answer. The bus starts at the Helen Schuler Nature Center in the river bottom, then heads to Fort Whoop-Up, the Galt Museum and Archives, the Southern Alberta Art Gallery and Casa, and then to Nika Yuko Japanese Garden. Once those trips are completed, it will make its way back to the Galt Museum and finally complete the trip at the Helen Schuler Nature Center. The project was in the planning stages for more than 3 years.
One of the things that we're looking forward to is engaging and interacting with those visitors on the bus, those citizens on the bus, just to really see and what they like, what they're enjoying, because that will help us and inform us what we develop in the years to come.
A total of 20 guests can board and be seated at once. A tourism ambassador from Tourism Lethbridge will also be on hand at various times to talk about the cultural attractions in our city.
We're just really excited as part of Lethbridge Transit to be partnered with this, and really hoping to see everybody on the bus for this great project, because it looks awesome and it's definitely going to catch your eye.
The CultureLink buses will run all week from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. until September 4th later this year. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
One of the many centers of attention around Lethbridge this past weekend was at Henderson Lake for the Dragon Boat Festival. Chair of the organizing committee, Diane Randall, says the weather was perfect for it.
Our setup on Friday was very wet, as you can recall, and we were really quite nervous about the opening ceremonies. But the clouds parted, and the opening ceremonies and the lion dance. So we had people in attendance that came down, and after the dignitary paddle, it was just, we had another little downpour, but then that was it for the whole weekend. We couldn't have been more pleased as an organizing committee, and the feedback that we got from all the participants, the athletes, the visitors, the volunteers, has been extremely positive.
While the final attendance numbers are not in just yet, Randall estimates well over 10,000 people were in attendance. It was great to see. The Lethbridge Pride Parade took place over the weekend as well. A large number of vehicles were decked out to celebrate the LGBTQ2+ community in our city. Just over 1,000 people attended the event. Organizers say this was the first Pride Parade for Lethbridge in just over 2 years.
I think it is so important to be able to come together as a community in physical spaces. The COVID-19 pandemic made us have to isolate and socially distance, and we weren't able to gather as friends and family and community, and you just can't replace that with FaceTime or online means. As best as it is, you just can't replace this. This is phenomenal. It's so important.
The first Lethbridge Pride Parade was held in 2007, and the first Alberta Pride Festival was held in Edmonton way back in 1980. Olivia is once again the most popular baby girl's name in Alberta, while Noah held on to the top spot for baby boys in our province. According to the government and documents that were just released, there were around 50,000 babies born in Alberta in 2021, just under 26,000 boys and just over 24,000 girls. After Olivia, the other top girls' names included Charlotte, Ava, Emma, and Amelia. Very pretty names. After Noah, for the boys, it was Jack, Liam, and Theodore. Officials say 2021 also saw a lot of creativity from parents in giving their children's names, such as Tuba, Archangel, Chickadee, and Jocko. There were also other names inspired by popular fictional characters, including Jedi, Anakin, Hobbs, and Furious. Furious, what a great name for a kid. The Colorado Avalanche are Stanley Cup champions for 2022. Now, it's their first championship in 22 years. But as you can see during the celebration, the Avs ended up damaging the Stanley Cup. The Avs won Game 6 in Tampa 2-1 on Sunday to take the series 4-2 and prevent the Lightning from winning their third consecutive championship. Born and raised Calgary defenseman Cale Makar was named the Conn Smythe Trophy winner as playoff MVP. Hopefully, Makar will bring the Stanley Cup to Calgary in the Stampede this year. Pig races are a popular and enduring attraction at state fairs in the United States, including the New Jersey State Fair at the Meadowlands. It's on now until mid-July. And as you're about to see in this next story, pig racing is serious business.
Got it. Number one, shaken.
So this year we have 3 different breeds of pigs racing, 15 pigs in total. The first heat during the show that you'll see are what we call a Meishan. They actually originated in China. They weren't imported into the U.S. until the late 80s. The second set of pigs you'll see race are your everyday farm pigs. They're a Yorkshire pig, and those guys are quite a bit faster. The main event are a Vietnamese pot-bellied pig, and those are the main event, and they burn up the track. So when it comes to training, the pigs actually race for a cream-filled cookie. So we use what we call a bait and reward system. We don't chase the pigs. The pigs don't run after anything like at a dog track. They're not chasing a bunny rabbit down. We don't have jockeys. So they know the first one that gets there is gonna get the treat. Everywhere they go before they get there, they get a little bit of a treat. But when they get to the finish line, the first one there gets the most of a cream-filled cookie, and that's the only time they get that sweet thing in their diet is during the show. The rest of the day, they get pretty much as much pig food as they'd like.
Those are some pretty big porkers near the end. You think they would maybe put in a little more hustle to get that cream-filled cookie. We had a nice start to the work week with lots of sunshine and warmth, and that will continue this week. Full weather details are coming up. You know, the average high for this time of year is around 24 degrees, and I believe we may have even surpassed that today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, did we get close to breaking a record high on Monday?
Well, although we got higher than our average high today, it wasn't quite a record breaker. Our record was actually broken in 2002 with a high of 32 degrees. We reached 27 today, which was about 5 degrees off. So not quite a record breaker, but maybe soon. Look at that temperature and this whole week, actually, and particularly on Tuesday, 29 degrees the high with lots of sunshine. Sunshine, in fact, throughout the whole week, 24 the high on Wednesday, 22 on Thursday, up to 27 on Friday, 27 as well on Saturday, and up to 29 on Sunday. So going to be a very warm week, right in time for Canada Day. Lovely weather. Average high for this time of year, 24. Average low at 10 degrees, 32. There it was. That was the record on this day back in 2002. 2007, we had our chilliest, which was only 2 degrees. Sun rose this morning at 5:26 a.m. and our sunset this evening, 9:43 p.m., giving us 16 hours and 16 minutes or so of daylight. We're a little bit shorter than we were last week. 20 degrees on the west coast tomorrow. Victoria seeing a risk of thunderstorms. 23 the high in Vancouver. Also rain and a risk of a thunderstorm there. 24 the high in Edmonton and 23 in Calgary with a mix of sun and cloud. Now I know the west coast, Vancouver particularly, has been under that high heat warning, and that should change tomorrow as a lower pressure system moves in, bringing cooler weather. 24 in Regina tomorrow, 23 in Saskatoon, and 21 in Winnipeg. Most of those prairie cities also seeing some humidity as well. As we look to the central part of the country, same thing. We're looking at warm, sunny weather and high humidity. 25 the high in Toronto, 24 in Ottawa, 24 the high also in Montreal, but Montreal expecting those showers right there. As we look to the East Coast, we are seeing more rain in some areas seeing 2 to 4 millimeters of rain. Fredericton's high 24, 21 the high in Halifax. Charlottetown 21 degrees and rain as well, 23 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a mix of sun and cloud. A little bit windy there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The conflict in Ukraine has been a running theme through Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's meetings in Germany at the G7 summit, along with his meetings at the Commonwealth Heads of Government last week in Rwanda. The heads of the world's most developed economies will listen to Ukraine President Zelensky's plea for more aid. Over the weekend, Canada pledged another $50 million to prevent Ukrainian grain from going to waste. G7 leaders are also expected to meet with India's Prime Minister, who has tightened economic and diplomatic ties with Russia in recent months. Russia is poised to default on its foreign debt for the first time since the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Financial experts say that will further alienate the country from the global financial system amid its war in Ukraine. A 30-day grace period on interest payments originally due May 27th expired Sunday night. It could take time, however, to confirm a default. Russia calls the default artificial because it has the money to pay, but sanctions have frozen its foreign currency reserves abroad. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision to end protections for abortions has created more division in the business world. A rash of iconic companies, including Disney, Facebook parent Meta, and Goldman Sachs, announced they will pay for travel expenses for employees wanting the procedure but cannot get it in the states they live in. Meanwhile, dozens of other big companies, including McDonald's, Walmart, and PepsiCo, have remained silent on the issue. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 195 points on the day to finish at 19,258. The Dow was down 62 points to 31,438. The S&P 500 was down 11 points to 3,900, and the Nasdaq was down 83 on the day to 11,524. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 220 to 109.82 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 18 cents to 640 U.S. Gold was down 7 cents to 18.2278 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up a cent to 21.17 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.20 per bushel, barley's at $9.36, canola's at $20.14, and corn is at $11.18 per bushel. Live cattle were up 90 cents to $136.25, feeder cattle were up $1.63 to $174.13, and lean hogs were down 75 cents to $110.18. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.66 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced that Canada Day celebrations are on again at the Legislature in Edmonton following a 2-year hiatus. Officials say visitors can enjoy free entertainment from noon until 5 on Friday. There will be lots of fun for the kids, along with various food trucks and food stands set up on the Edmonton Legislature grounds. The Taliban is calling on the international community to roll back sanctions and lift a freeze on bank assets following last week's devastating earthquake. If the funds were to be released, would they actually make their way to the Afghani people who are in dire need of humanitarian aid? Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari gives us her thoughts next.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The live theater troupe Hootenanny returns to Gull Gardens with the play The Junk Show. 2 oddball junk collectors spend their days sorting through junk that no one wants. It's hard work, but so much fun as their imaginations embark on exciting adventures with the junk that they've called So Good. Come out and enjoy this live performance starting July 2nd and running through to July 30th, every Wednesday to Saturday at 10:30 a.m. at Gull Gardens. For more information, visit newwesttheatre.com/Hootenanny. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a non-profit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or visit their website lethbridgelegalguidance.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The U.S.-Iran nuclear talks will resume in the coming days. Now, that's according to sources from both the European Union and Tehran. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, what's the big significance of these talks?
You know, that's a great question because common sense would dictate that we should not get back into these talks, that the Western world should abandon these talks, that the behavior that we've seen from the Iranian regime, whether it's about importing, exporting terror, whether it's about continuing on with its weapons program, whether it's about, not being transparent and taking away cameras and not allowing IAEA, those are the inspectors from the UN, to come in, whether it's about, chest thumping and continuing its activities in the region, or whatever they're doing at the negotiating table that has not led to a deal thus far. What on earth do the Europeans and the Americans believe that they will get out of the Iran regime is beyond me. But it seems as though this is the policy that they have set out for Iran. So rather than being able to pressure the Iranian regime the way that the Trump administration was very much in support of, they would rather continue with this deal. Now, day after day, there are Iran protests going on the ground over there. The Iranian people are telling us, don't get back into the deal. Do not normalize relations with our regime. Help us. And even if it's a verbal, even if it's a statement from the White House podium, give us some support so that we can have a grassroots revolution the way we did in 1979, which got us to a very bad place with the Islamic regime. But hopefully we can have another revolution and have a better government. So it makes no sense at all to go back to your original question. The significance of it is that this is the policy that the Western world has carved out for themselves. They would like to normalize relations. They are after appeasement. And with the Iranian regime, it seems like the harder they play to get, then the more that the Western world wants this deal. It's crazy, but this is where we're headed.
And as the nuclear talks continue, Iran apparently launched a rocket into space, which naturally drew condemnation from Washington.
Right. So think about it. If you're trying to get into a deal, if you're trying to get billions of dollars from the West, why would you be, again, flexing your muscles this way and launching the rocket? And again, to your point, Hal, Washington will issue statements of condemnation, whether it's about the weapons program, whether it's about not letting in the inspectors on their in their facilities, whether it's about the protests. But then they still want to go forward with the deal. So it really doesn't make sense. If you line up all the evidence, you'd think that the Washington would abandon this deal and say, you know what, we got to not only keep these sanctions in place, not only keep all these bad actors and bad players on the terror list, but to really think of a new policy regarding Iran, because it's just not working.
U.S.-sponsored talks between Israel and a number of Gulf states have taken amid increased threats from Tehran. Lisa, that included officers from both United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Oman and Kuwait did not participate, however.
Yeah, so this is about, and we've seen this before, and I'll really go back to the Abraham Accords to illustrate the point, is that the Middle East will be divided into modern states and not so modern states. And the modern states are the ones, not that they particularly are very fond of Israel, and that's not their agenda. Their agenda is not to be stuck in the dark ages. Their agenda is not to be taken over by terrorists. Their agenda is to move forward and be prosperous and to be involved in economic deals and have technology and have apps and cell phones and iPads and all that wonderful stuff. And for that reason, many of these countries like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco have signed on to the Abraham Accords. And those are the same list of countries that you just listed that will sit down to come up with a way to curb the Iranian regime's influence. Now, the Iranian regime is the original Islamic State. We think of ISIS and like, oh, they're so big and bad. ISIS was nothing compared to the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is Shiite, and they want to spread their influence and their territory, influence, everything throughout the region. And these Persian Gulf states that you mentioned, along with Israel, want to obviously curb that sphere of influence that is growing. So that's why you have the list of countries, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar pretty much plays the line because they want to have both sides and they don't really want to pick sides. But you do see that the way that these Arab nations are falling really determines how they will perceive their own future.
Health officials in Afghanistan, Lisa, are warning of disease outbreaks among earthquake survivors. More than 1,000 people have already died following that devastating 6.1 magnitude earthquake, which rocked the Taliban-led nation.
Yes, this is a huge devastation for that country. Obviously, a very, very, very harsh earthquake with infrastructure that can't support that kind of quake. And then you have, obviously not, the Taliban is not going to take care of these people. They're not going to provide the right facilities and hospital care and rescue aid workers, et cetera, to get the people out in time and to save lives, et cetera. Now, the interesting part is, while we know that this was a very harsh earthquake, while we feel for the people of Afghanistan, we really can't trust the information coming out of Afghanistan either, because it is run by the Taliban. The media, the government, everything is run by the Taliban, and they're using this earthquake to take advantage of, obviously, humanitarian aid and global sympathy, and they're asking for their frozen assets to be unfrozen and to be given back to Afghanistan. This is something that the Taliban have always wanted since coming into power, so now they will take advantage of this time period and say, you know what, it's for the people of Afghanistan. But will that money and aid, if it is given back to Afghanistan, will it go to the people of Afghanistan? I hardly, I doubt it. It will go towards terrorism and the Taliban and really growing their power over the poor people of Afghanistan.
You know what, you bring up a very valuable point. I'm just thinking that the country's fragile health system is already quite strained. Then you throw in this earthquake, 2,000 people injured, more than 1,000 killed, and 10,000 displaced with the homes being rocked and damaged. Do you think there could be a potential uprising against the Taliban if a lot of the locals do not receive the humanitarian aid that they need so desperately?
It's a great question, because that's how these movements begin, right? They have to be at literal rock bottom and then have a reason to come out onto the streets. Now, the unfortunate thing is that the people in Afghanistan are very poor. They don't have the right organization or weapons or ability to come out. And the Taliban, they're ruthless. They don't mind, shedding the blood of the Afghan people. They're not truly for the Afghan people. So, I think if they were to do such a thing, it would probably last about 24 to 48 hours, meaning the Taliban would probably, try to put an end to it so quickly that it would not be able to take, any or get any kind of momentum going. But it's a great question, because I do think with time, the poverty, the point you bring up, that's a wonderful point. And to remember is groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Taliban, even the Iranian regime to a certain extent, they have always been able to keep a certain segment of the population as their constituents by providing the soup kitchens and the madrasas, the schools, and really brainwashing a certain segment of the population by also giving them certain of their basic needs. And the Taliban will probably do the same and have these local spies everywhere by giving a certain segment of the population what they need in order to do their dirty work. And I think it's very unfortunate. A lot of the brains, the brain drain that Afghanistan had. So a lot of people moved out of the country. So the people who are left don't always have the means to have that, political savvy or be able to organize. They can come out onto the streets, but then again, they would be risking their lives to do so.
Lisa, in light of the Supreme Court striking down Roe versus Wade, a number of left-leaning Americans are allegedly turning their rage to former heroes Ruth Bader Ginsburg and former President Barack Obama. Tell me more.
It's very interesting what's going on in the United States right now. It's not our most flattering moment in terms of, the protests, the backlash, the way that they're treating the police, the way that, and ironically, these are in states where abortion will always be allowed, like, California and New York, where it is just part of the culture. And for some reason, they're so fixated on it that it will not go away and probably won't have any restrictions. So you'll be able to get one. And now you see they're turning on, when you look back, you look at Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, obviously what people are missing with their knee-jerk reaction to this overturn is that it is based on the Constitution. It's not based on feelings or emotions or the anecdotes of the woman who was raped or the woman who had, a child that had abnormalities. It's not even about that. This is a political decision rooted in the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution. So when they do read, or they have videos of, Joe Biden back in the day, or any one of these liberal heroes, it's unfortunate because they can't even tolerate it. And that's why these facts are often ignored in this discussion to just bring up a lot of emotion. 99% of what we're seeing online in social media and the memes, it's factually incorrect. It's just dishonest. And again, people are bringing up a lot of things from the past and are really ignoring why this was overturned. It's not that we had abortion in this country and now we took it away. It's that now they have decided that it really never was rooted in any sort of legal constitutional premise. It was actually, the premise of it was for the physicians to have liberty, not the woman or the person carrying the baby to have the liberty. So you and I can have a 5-hour conversation about this. It's a very, very nuanced, which is why it's very difficult to have a conversation with people who are ignorant or choosing to be ignorant of the facts, but it is extremely nuanced. And again, it was a very difficult task for the Supreme Court to make this overturn, but again, they did their job on what they believed was based on the Constitution.
Let's head overseas for just a moment again here, Lisa. There are reports that Russia is going to be sending nuclear-capable missiles to Belarus. Russian President Putin said the weapons transfer would be discussed between the defense ministers of the two countries. Putin also said Russia would help Belarus upgrade its fleet of fighter jets to make them capable of carrying nuclear weapons.
This is all we needed, right? So this is Russia 2.0. They want to equip and train and really bring Belarus into the fold, perhaps. It's interesting. The war and the invasion of Ukraine hasn't really moved forward much. We have a few more territories, but moving very slowly along. But we do see a lot of transfer of weapons in every direction, whether it's going to the Ukrainians, with Russia, transferring it to Belarus. It's an interesting concept to think about with the economy being where it is and so much equipment and military aid going around. We don't know what the off-ramp will be for Putin on this. And in giving more equipment to Belarus and perhaps bringing them into the war, doesn't look like is going to take an off-ramp anytime soon. It looks like it's only going to widen the scope of this current war. So all eyes are on that part of the world, and we're hoping for a de-escalation rather than an escalation very soon.
Now, still with Russia, they're edging closer to default amid a little sign that investors holding its international bonds had received any payment, Lisa. This could be the nation's first default in decades.
Yes, and let's see if that even happens. I mean, the fact that Russia has been able to hold on for this long is pretty amazing. And the strategy they used is to pay their interest and not to pay the principal, and to be able to stave off those who they owe, and to continue going. And that's exactly what they have done. It looks like everything has basically been kind of frozen for a while, and then they've been able to continue, status quo. But inside outside Russia. We know a lot of different businesses and franchises and American or European owned businesses have pulled out of the country. So they are struggling in many different ways, perhaps not defaulting just yet. But as you said, Hal, it looks like they're headed in that direction. And of course, only, how long can they survive under these very, very restrictive sanctions?
The group of 7 leaders pledged to raise around $600 billion in private and public funds over the next 5 years to finance needed infrastructure in developing countries and counter China's older multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road project. Can you explain what that is?
I love that you said older, because you really hit the nail on the head. I don't really need to say much. A little too late on this, Hal. China has had this project for many, many years. This has been China's strategy, and I will explain. China has put trillions of dollars going into all parts of the world and saying, we will give you XYZ in exchange for ABC. And the XYZ is usually roads, infrastructure, bridges, schools, hospitals, telephone lines, internet lines. And in exchange, they want access. And that access is what will give them more territorial power, more influence, and that's exactly what they want. They want to build, their empire, so to speak. And now, the G7 is kind of like showing up and saying, let's raise a little bit of money. We're going to have a little fund here to kind of combat this strategy that China has had, again, pouring trillions of dollars into places where they have, for example, a 25-year deal with the Iran regime. I mean, these are huge transfers and huge deals. Now, whether China will continue to have the funds to continue with this strategy, or whether it will slow down and focus on other parts of the world, other parts of its strategies is, it's up in the air. But the point being that China has been at this for many, many years, and it's going to be, honestly, I'm glad that the world has finally realized what China is up to. But again, I don't know if they'll have enough time or manpower or financial resources to combat this.
Our foreign affairs expert and regular contributor, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us again from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
What a week it's been here in Alberta. Provincially, we have the UCP leadership race, cabinet shuffles, and court cases over the COVID restrictions. Federally, the Canadian government spending seems to have no limits, as does their inflation. There's so much to talk about, and for that, of course, we have Western Standard editor Dave Naylor with us today. Dave, thanks so much for joining me. Good to have you on.
Always a pleasure, Jeanette.
Fantastic. So, Dave, there's so much going on. Number one, all the contenders for the leadership of the UCP. Can we get your take on the front runners?
Michelle Rempel-Garner, MP for Calgary-Nose Hill, has decided not to throw her hat into the ring. A bit of a surprise. I thought she was going to. In a lengthy Substack post, she basically said her entrance would have caused too much friction within the caucus. We had an exclusive story this week that 13 caucus members, 13 MLAs, had voted no to allow her to have a special exemption to run. So she knew she was going to get into a bit of a
little bit of a battle,
a problem caucus. So she's decided not to run. That leaves Travis Taves, the former finance minister, Danielle Smith, the former Wild Rose leader and talk show host, and Brian Jean, former MP and now current UCP MLA, as the frontrunners. Poll out this week had Danielle Smith at 24%, Brian Jean at 23%. So they're clearly the two frontrunners. Travis Taves was trailing with 14%, and all the rest didn't even get anywhere close to 10%. So Danielle Smith has made a couple of major announcements this week. She says if she becomes premier, she'll introduce basically an Alberta Sovereignty Act, that anything that Ottawa does that we don't like, we're just going to opt out of it. We don't like their new gun law, so we're just not going to do it. Her other statement is that she promises that she will never ever lock people down again. as we've just gone through the COVID pandemic. She will not have under her leadership. Schools will remain open. Businesses will not be shut. Two very interesting and probably pretty popular things for UCP members to mull over there.
I know. What about anyone else on the outside that may actually be a legitimate contender? Can you think of anyone?
Well, I mean, Michelle Rempel-Garner was going to be that person. So I don't see any major outsider coming in. Never say never, but in terms of maybe a business leader or something like that, I don't see it. I think what you see is basically what you're going to get.
Yeah, you mentioned the cost to run, and of course we've talked about that before. The cost even just to get the opportunity to get in there and run. So, in your opinion, Dave, where does that money come from, and what happens to the funds after the race is over?
Well, you have to have some good fundraisers. Take a guy like Mayor Rock. He's a mayor of this small town. He doesn't have $175,000. So unless he's got some big pocket advisors, make it. He says he will, but 25% of that is a refundable bond, for lack of a better word. So, if you get through the campaign without misbehaving, you'll get 25 grand back. The other 150 grand goes to run the leadership race. So it is just such an enormous chunk of cash. For example, one province away, the NDP are holding a leadership race there, and their entry fee is $4,000.
Wow.
So
quite a difference.
It's a bit of a difference, isn't it, Jeanette?
Just a little bit. Now, speaking of costs, Brian Jean had a social media post out earlier this week asking people what they want to see the government spend on upcoming surpluses. So is this a good and a smart move on his part, or is it putting the cart before the horse? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it never hurts to ask the public what they want, right? And if everybody in the public says we want money to go and pay down the debt, well, then a smart politician will do what the public wants. So yeah, I mean, it can never go wrong. It's never a bad thing to hear from the electorate at any time. But whether they listen or not is the question.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, and then so most of the comments that look like in return to his question were Albertans requesting that the province pay off debt. But Brian Jean said that debts could not be paid until the debt was due. So have things changed maybe since the Ralph Klein days? He didn't seem to have a problem paying off debt. So what's your take on this?
Well, I don't know. If I've got my mortgage and I suddenly come into money, I can pay off my mortgage, surely, right? The money that's coming into Alberta with oil above $100 a barrel is incredible. It's partly why they were able to balance the budget this year. So, every day the UCP's got a different press conference, and millions going there, millions going here, millions going everywhere. So they have money to play with. I have no idea if you've got a surplus of say 50. Pick a figure out of that. Say 10 billion a year surplus. I have no idea why you can't go to the bank and say, all right, here's 10 billion. Lower our interest rates or lower our payments. Surely they could do that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's an appetite in Alberta for a more fiscally conservative leader? Can people handle another Ralph Klein?
Well, it depends on oil prices, I think, Jeanette. Keep in mind we've had 2.5 years of the government basically handing out money left, right, and center. If you don't have a job, well, here's CERB, the feds have no problem ringing up the deficit. It's the debt. It's more than $1 trillion now. I think most sensible Albertans realize that, hey, the debt payments every year, several hospitals across the province could hire thousands of nurses, but we can't because we have to pay down this debt. So I think responsible Albertans don't want to leave that to their children.
Yeah, most likely not. Now, earlier you had mentioned that kind of like Danielle Smith saying that we're not going to follow what Ottawa does. So there seems to be that strong conservative-minded leadership where it's kind of like the Alberta separatist members could actually do more working with the existing structure. So do you think that these groups might be more effective working within the existing parties?
Well, one of Jason Kenney's big failures was he was seen as not standing up to Ottawa, even though he did. We had a vote on equalization. He should have been on a plane the next day when the results were announced, should have gone to Ottawa with the referendum package and said, look, we want changes, but he didn't do that. The only thing he's done out of everything that was promised was appoint a Alberta firearms officer. But, we don't have a provincial police force yet. We don't have a provincial pension plan yet. So this whole UCP leadership race seems to be, Alberta first based. What can we fight the feds over? So I think a lot of the former UCP members who may have left towards the Wild Rose Independence Party maybe look at this and say, you know what, maybe they're starting to talk the proper game now, and maybe we will see some action, and then it may lure them back. Wild Rose themselves is in a terrible turmoil at the moment. A report this week into the Fort McMurray-Lac-La-Biche by-election, very hard leader Paul Hinman, accusing him of all sorts of financial irregularities. And Hinman himself expects, he could be removed from his job. So terrible time. We're less than a year from an election. And if they lose their party leader, and you've got all the UCP candidates speaking strongly against Ottawa, it may lure some of their voters back to them.
Mm-hmm. And you'd mentioned we still don't have a provincial police force. So there is continued talk of that. So, Dave, what do you think the benefits would be from creating an Alberta police force?
Oh, just look at this week, Jeanette. We have the story of the head of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki, personally interfering in an investigation to try, in an investigation in Canada's worst mass killing. She interfered to try and help the Prime Minister's office, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair, and Justin Trudeau. She interfered. It's a politicized department from the top down. Average RCMP officer on the street, great people, hardworking people, but the rot is at the top. If you bring in an Alberta police force, I think what you'll see is a lot of RCMP members, who don't like the postings in rural areas or don't like what's going on in the RCMP. They'll just swap badges and they'll come over and join the Alberta force. Very similar to what's going on in Surrey right now, where they're getting rid of the RCMP and forming their own force. So, RCMP officers are coming over to the new one. So it would be a benefit that the Alberta police force would not be controlled by a politically minded top cop in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute here and talk about the opposition. So right now, Rachel Notley seems to be having to be a bit of a sheriff in her party. So she's apologized for what was described as bullying tactics against volunteers. So do you think NDP members will see anything other than an apology from the party leader?
Well, I mean, they've got their apology. The people who complained about the bullying seem satisfied with it. I think right now she's just keeping her head down and just letting the UCP, tear each other to bits and have their leadership candidates attack each other. All the polls are now showing it's, they've only got a 5% lead over the UCP. A poll out yesterday showed them that they'd be in a dead heat if Michelle Rempel-Garner joined the race, but obviously that's a moot point now. But you don't want to upset your volunteers. They're the key. They're the people that do all the hard work and the door knocking. And if you created an environment that they're not happy with, you're in big trouble. So if Notley is smart, she's taking an internal look and saying, guys, we got to stop this, and just making sure that it doesn't happen again. Because if it does, again, we're only less than a year away from the election, and NDP will probably keep Edmonton, and Calgary will be a battlefield, and the rurals will probably go UCP. So you don't want to upset your volunteers in Calgary because they're going to be needed to help you form government next May.
Absolutely. Do you think the NDP can maybe find enough votes to win the election next spring?
Well, keep in mind they won pretty handily the last time. I think what's going to have to happen, Jeanette, is, and it was Kenny's plan before he got the boot, was the economy. The economy in Alberta is starting to grow strong now. We're leading the nation. If we get a full year of this before the next election, I would think it would be looking pretty good for the UCP. If we go into pandemics and more problems with that, there's a expected, I think, 7th wave now coming in September. If that goes badly, then the NDP, it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be close. It's going to be fun political theater, which I can't wait for.
All right. Well, Dave, it looks like that's all the time we have for today. We could go on talking about this all day, obviously, but thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jeanette.
Absolutely. That was Dave Naylor, editor for the Western Standard, joining me from Calgary. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.